Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet. We start with the top headlines of today.
In honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
Dressed like a sanitation worker, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump boards a garbage van. This comes as a response to an apparent verbal gaffe made by President Biden. Democrat Kamala Harris holds another Get Out the Vote rally in Madison. She pitches her usual stump speech to the audience, many whom were young first-time voters. And US pro-Palestine protesters interrupt US Vice President Kamala Harris's closing argument election speech in Washington, D.C. Protesters call for ceasefire. Vice presidential nominee of the Democratic Party, Tim Walz, expresses his primary concern, says Trump's victory could lead to a loss of faith in voting and democratic participation among Americans. With only 5 days until United States Election Day, Democrat Kamala Harris and Republican Trump are both in the pivotal battleground states of Nevada and Arizona, making their final pitches. The latest polls from The Economist, YouGov, indicate that Harris is leading of just 1 percentage point, with 44% of voters supporting her compared with 43% for Donald Trump. All right, the presidential candidates are hitting their rhetoric. While Kamala Harris spoke from the January 6th insurrection site, Donald Trump rallied in Pennsylvania, where he had survived an alleged assassination attempt on him. As they make their final bids, let's understand from our correspondent Hiral, who is in New York City right now, as to what is going on. Hiral Sachde is joining us from New York at this point in time. Thank you so much, Hiral, for being here. Important to understand what exactly is going on over here and what do both the candidates have going in their favor. Well, first up, Harris was at the January 6th insurrection site to campaign yesterday. Will it be a major factor when people go out to vote for her?
Yes, the presidential race is surely heating up. Madison Square Garden versus Capitol Hill. Now, Capitol Hill was a very strategic location. What happened on 6th Jan 2020 at Capitol Hill is unprecedented. This kind of violence, post polls, a violence which a lot of people believe was incited by Donald Trump, who was president then, who refused to take the electoral loss with grace and dignity. And then the supporters were Trump supporters, and instead of trying to send out any sort of message, make a statement telling them not to be violent, he kind of was complicit by silence, you can say, just like you have guilty by association, but in a way complicit by silence. And that is what a lot of lawsuits thereafter have also spoken about. So Kamala Harris being at that location was actually invoking in people's memory what happened there, because I don't think any American, whether their political leanings be Republican or Democrat, was ever supportive of what happened. Uh, it linked Donald Trump specifically to what happened that day. In my mind, I don't know if other voters, other audience members were also viewing it that way. So standing on Capitol Hill ellipse and making her closing argument as a presidential candidate up against Donald Trump was a, I would say, a very strategic move by Democrats in the run up to the elections.
Right. Well, Donald Trump was in Pennsylvania yesterday, the swing state that was won by Biden in 2020 by a razor-thin margin. Will the assassination bid incident get Trump the sympathy that he's been asking for?
Democrats have spent considerable time in swing states. In fact, 3 of these states flipped from Democrat to Republican in 2016, and then Biden managed to flip them back to Democrats in 2020. So let's look at the latest polls of what it shows in Pennsylvania. Emerson survey shows that Trump has about 49% of voters, while Harris has 48. Bloomberg says Trump has 48.2 and Harris has 50%. Pennsylvania has historically leaned Democrat. Since 1998, Pennsylvanians have picked Democrats until 2016 when they actually picked Donald Trump. So, given going by the numbers, Trump does not seem to have a huge advantage because of uh, the shootout that happened at his rally, which was in Pennsylvania. But at the same time, we don't see a very clear edge for Kamala Harris as well in the swing states.
Right. Well, there is also a war of words between Trump and Biden and Harris over immigration and the Puerto Rico vote. Will this sway the migrant votes one way or the other?
So, if we compare the two speeches, Donald Trump has said he is going to evict immigrants. His stance seems to be specifically against illegal immigrants, violent immigrants with violent backgrounds. And what Kamala Harris again has said that yes, she would also deport immigrants who are specifically involved in crime, and that does not go only against immigrants. Anybody involved in a crime against American citizen is subject to a judicial process. So Trump has spoken of deporting large number of people, whereas Kamala Harris has cited a judicial solution as and when a situation arises. Uh, Trump's legacy on tough immigration was panned when he was in the office because it's remembered for what it did to families. It separated families, and that was the biggest criticism that his program drew. However, Harris seems to be presenting a more rational view at the moment, but the immigration problem is more complex than that. It changes from state to state. It also changes from how each citizens of each different state perceive immigrants and perceive what it does to their social, cultural, and fiscal resources. So it's not a straightforward answer as far as the immigrant point about immigrants goes, the issue about, as far as the issue about immigration goes, well, we have to see what exactly the people are subscribing to.
Right. And how are the Americans reacting to the garbage commentary in the final days ahead of the US polls from Puerto Rico being called a floating island of garbage to Biden calling Trump supporters in Puerto Rico garbage as well?
Okay, at Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden, we had comedian Tony Hinchcliffe call Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Now, definitely that has not gone down well with Puerto Rican immigrants, people of Puerto Rican descent. Celebrities like Bad Bunny and Ricky Martin have actually slammed what the comedian said. Now, conveniently, the Trump campaign and Trump himself has distanced from these remarks. He has categorically said that, well, those are the campaign put out a statement saying that those were the views of the comedian and they don't necessarily ascribe or subscribe to it. At one point, Trump has even said, who is this guy? You know, why should we bother so much about him? As far as the vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance goes, he's also tried to make light of the entire speech at Madison Square Garden. So, if you see how that impacts Latino voters, let's say until September, more voters backed Harris. 36 million strong vote base. That is what the Latinos bring to the table. And historically, they have tended to vote for Democrats. But in October, however, Donald Trump seemed to have gained marginal ground. So from 39%, he now has 40. He had 40% vote share. So he seemed to be making some headway with the Hispanic and Latino voters. But this remark again has given a chance to his critics, given a chance to pro Democrats to highlight that Trump is not standing with this particular community, this particular group of people, this particular ethnic group of people. So recently, after the rally at Madison Square Garden, Trump was in Pennsylvania. He was in one of the parts of Pennsylvania which has a majority of Hispanic and Latino population. And he also got an endorsement from the local leaders. So all is not lost yet for Trump, but well, this remark has definitely not gone down well across sections of society.
Well, Democrats have targeted Trump, called him a Nazi, a racist, fascist. Are Americans buying this description?
Well, American voters are used to Trump's barbs even when he was outside of office, right from the Obama administration days until now. So his supporters lap it up when he makes remarks like that. But at the same time, his critics don't let go of an opportunity to bank on these and prove that how he's not an ideal candidate. So Trump's choice of words has always landed him in hot waters. Okay, it has always given fodder and provided monikers for him. This time it is racist, fascist. So does this ideology really sway voters? I don't think so. The voters are pretty smart to see through the rhetoric, see through the chest thumping remarks that he makes. I think that the voters are much smarter with and will probably make an informed choice on November 5th.
Well, how important is the vote of Indian Americans in this election, according to you, and how have they traditionally voted?
According to a recent survey by YouGov, we see that Indian American women, 67% of them would want to vote for Harris, whereas 53% of Indian American men would vote for Harris. Compared to that, 22% of the women want to vote for Trump, and 39% of the men want to support Trump. 47% of Indian Americans identified as Democrats in 2024 compared to 56% in 2020. And I think that is where the crux of the matter lies, that they are slowly Democrats are slowly and steadily losing the Indian voter base. Now, if you could probably say the reason could be that Republicans have more candidates who are or pitched more people with South Asian descent like Nikki Haley, Usha Vance, and Vivek Ramaswamy. But it's not like these candidates have been able to create a very positive image or have resonated with the voters. So they don't hold a very high regard or very high opinion of the candidates that have come out of the Republican Party with a South Asian background.
Well, can Harris's India connection be a motivation for Indian Americans to vote for her or not?
So yeah, you clearly see that Kamala Harris definitely holds a lead in the South Asian community, and her Indian that has got more to do with the way Indian Americans vote. You cannot necessarily say that it is because of her South Asian roots, but well, clearly she herself, as far as her identity goes, she has never really tried to portray herself strongly as a part of one ethnic group over other. So she has tried to maintain an image that she is everyone's president and does not really favor any one community over the other.
Right, and who will be a better American president for India's foreign policy with the United States, according to you?
India is in a win-win situation as far as the strategic ties with America go, and whether it is Trump or Kamala Harris in the Oval Office, I think India still stands to benefit. If you look at what happened during the Trump administration, they had very strong ties with India. The Indo-US relationship is very strategic for both countries at the moment. Trump also had personal relations, good, strong personal relations with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and of course his strategy is more transactional. It's more about what he gets in terms of trade benefits and economic ties, business ties. And when it comes to Kamala Harris, it's more of a strategic partnership. India is being viewed as a power to counterbalance Chinese influence in the South Asian continent. So, from that perspective, India holds a significant position for both candidates, I feel, and both parties at the moment.
All right, thank you for those updates. Well, with 4 days to go for Election Day, Harris has campaigned in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, where pro Palestinian protesters interrupted her rallies in the battleground states. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has visited Wisconsin, where he posed in a garbage truck amidst Republican criticism of recent comments by President Biden. Let us take a look at the report of the two presidential candidates and their recent rallies.
With less than 1 week before Election Day, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump hosted rival events in the swing states of Wisconsin and North Carolina where both are fighting for undecided voters. Harris called on Americans to stop pointing fingers at each other as she attempted to move past President Joe Biden's comments in which he appeared to call Donald Trump's supporters garbage. Kamala Harris warned a crowd that time was running out at a Get Out the Vote event in Madison, Wisconsin. The vice president and Democratic nominee told the crowd, denouncing Donald Trump and issuing a dire warning about the consequences of a second Trump presidency.
If he is elected on day one, Donald Trump will walk into that office with an enemies list. When I am elected, I will walk in with a to-do list.
Harris says she is ready to succeed Joe Biden as U.S. president during her campaign speech. She highlighted her policy plans on taxes, healthcare, and abortion rights.
It is time for a new generation of leadership in America. And I am ready with you. I am ready to offer that leadership as the next president of the United States of America.
Harris has campaigned in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, with pro-Palestinian protesters interrupting her rallies, shouting "Free Palestine" and unfurling banners. Meanwhile, Trump hopped into the passenger seat of a white garbage truck bearing his name. The former president wanted to draw attention to a remark made a day earlier by his successor, Democratic President Joe Biden, that suggested Trump's supporters were garbage. Trump has used the remark as a cudgel against his Democratic rival, Vice President Kamala Harris.
How do you like my garbage truck? This truck is in honor of Kamala and Joe Biden.
Trump and other Republicans were facing pushback of their own for comments by a comedian at a weekend Trump rally who disparaged Puerto Rico as a floating island of garbage. Trump then seized on Biden's comment.
And I have to begin by saying 250 million Americans are not garbage.
The president tried to clarify the comment afterward, saying he had intended to say Trump's demonization of Latinos was unconscionable.
I love Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico loves me. I don't know anything about a comedian. I love Puerto Rico.
So far, more than 50 million Americans have already voted. This includes about 29.3 million in-person votes and roughly 26 million mail-in ballots. Bureau Report NewsX.
All right, at this point in time, Elizabeth Lattis, non-resident senior fellow of the Atlantic Council, joins us on the program. Elizabeth, thank you so much for speaking with us. Well, Trump and Biden have sparred over the unsavory comment on Puerto Ricans. Could this impact the way Puerto Ricans and other migrants vote?
It could impact the few undecided people of Puerto Rican heritage and perhaps Latinos living in the United States. As you know, Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico cannot vote. However, the shadow senator, Zairado Bucio, she did come out and endorse Trump, and she said, don't be distracted by the noise. After the comedian at the Trump rally made those comments, and remember, it wasn't Trump who made the comments, it was the comedian. Now, maybe it was a bad choice, to pick this comedian for a rally. Afterwards, the Harris administration, as well as the media, really ramped up using the Nazi label, and then you probably heard that President Biden said the only garbage out there are Trump supporters, of which in the last election there were 70-odd million. So I don't know. There's so many labels being thrown around at this point. It could have some impact at the margins, which in the battleground states, that's where the game is being played. So it's possible.
All right. Well, Kamala Harris strategically held a rally at the January 6th insurrection site and attacks on Trump, calling him a fascist, racist, a Nazi, resonating with the average American. What do you make of these thoughts?
I don't see that being an effective strategy to convince voters not to vote for Trump. The Never Trumpers weren't going to vote, for him anyway. I distinctly recall that the label Nazi, Hitler, was also applied to Mitt Romney when he was running for president against Barack Obama. It was applied to President Bush, I believe both the President Bushes. So it's a label that is revived by the Democratic Party in nearly every presidential election. And so if you use it all the time for every candidate, it really loses its punch. And so again, the candidates are trying to get those few undecideds out there in the battleground states. Will it persuade a few people at this point? I don't see that it's going to move the margins very much.
Do you think that the January 6th insurrection is still fresh in the minds of the voters, and will this impact this election as well?
I don't think that it is fresh anymore. People certainly remember it, particularly those who are critical of Trump. Again, the Never Trumpers, it might be fresh in the minds of the Never Trumpers. He wasn't going to get their vote anyway. The freshest issues right now are the economy, particularly high prices that came about from high inflation, and the high cost of housing. Mortgages are high and houses are expensive, and so people can't afford to move out of their houses, and young couples can't afford to buy houses, and rents are going up tremendously. The other thing that's freshest in people's mind is the problem of illegal immigration. So those are the things that are the pressing issues right now. Those are the things that the candidates really need to hammer home, rather than reminding people of something that happened, 3.5 years ago.
All right, well, poll projections put Trump ahead of Harris on economic policies. Could this tilt the polls in Trump's favor, according to you?
Yes. I think that his campaign has been effective in saying, were you better off under my administration than under the Biden-Harris administration? And it is true, inflation was low. He or his administration had removed a lot of regulation from businesses, had cut corporate business taxes. So all of that contributed to a dynamic economy. And then it's true that when Biden-Harris came into office, the U.S. was experiencing the COVID pandemic, but in following through with a second stimulus package on top of the Trump one, caused inflation to go shooting skyward, and that hurt a lot of Americans in their pocketbook. Real wages have fallen 4.5% at least since the Trump administration. And that's not something that's lost on the average American when he or she goes to the grocery store or pays the bills. So I think if Trump is doing better on the economy, that is certainly to his advantage, and that would be a strong suit for him to continue to play in the remaining few days before the election.
Well, Trump has alienated himself from women voters with his anti-abortion policy. How significant is the women vote in U.S. polls?
The women's vote is very significant. There has been for many years a so-called gender gap between men and women, between the Republican and the Democratic Party. And even within the Republican Party right now, there is a discernible gender gap. And that is why Kamala Harris is going after the women's vote. Former First Lady Michelle Obama has been campaigning for her. A number of celebrities have come out to try to get that suburban women's vote. The question is, Trump has made a lot of inroads with young men, the young male voter, as well as young minority men. more than 30% of young Black men say that they support Trump. So Harris has to go after the women's vote to balance that out. I look forward to seeing the statistics after the election to see how the chips fall. But we can say with a lot of certainty here that she will certainly get a lot of the women's vote. And again, it's so important in those swing states.
Right, Elizabeth, who is more likely to be more aggressive on China, Trump or Kamala Harris?
All indicators are that Trump would be more aggressive. I know his critics said that he has praised Xi Jinping for his ability to control a population of 1.4 billion. He has also compared China to the size of that huge desk in the Oval Office and Taiwan to the point of a Sharpie pen. However, when you look at his policies, he did bring the hammer down on trade with China in the form of high tariffs against Chinese imports, and he has signed off on every arms package to Taiwan that crossed his desk. So looking at his actions 4 years ago as president, we can see that he likely will be tough on China. Again, Harris is much more from that Democratic Party vein of engagement. And to engage requires that you go over and you talk and that you are somewhat approachable to China. So I think that Trump would be tougher. Harris would be more open to engagement with China.
Elizabeth, appreciate you taking out the time and speaking with us. Thank you so much. All right, on that note, we're going to dip into a short break. Be right back.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.